Thank you for taking the time to join us. My name is Manu Martinez Miralles, and I will be your moderator today. I am the New York liaison for the United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research, and also a researcher with the Conventional Arms and Ammunition Program, CAP for short. For those who don't know, UNIDIR is an independent and autonomous research institute within the UN, and we focus our work on disarmament and international security-related issues. Our goal is to assist the international community to develop practical and innovative ideas to find solutions to critical security problems. And the Conventional Arms and Ammunition Program undertakes research to both examine the supply side and demand side dynamics of the illicit proliferation of conventional arms and ammunition, and identify measures to tackle the unregulated transfer, illicit circulation, and misuse of conventional arms and ammunition. We also love to share our key findings via advice and support to multilateral processes like the Program of Action, as well as in capacity building for states, regional, and international organizations, as we seek to promote ideas and action to prevent the negative impact of proliferation and misuse of arms and ammunition. And thus, this lay the foundations for peace, security, and sustainable development. So first, allow me to provide some housekeeping announcements. I want to reassure you that you are in the right place and that we are just started on time. We will have an hour, and I think we will finish on time as well. Kindly note that the cameras and microphones will be off by design throughout this webinar, but participants are strongly encouraged to post their questions on the Q&A function at any time during this event. For those of you who are unfamiliar with WebEx, you can find the Q&A button in the bottom right of the screen near the chat function. As time permits, I will relay these questions to our dear panelists today. And please, when you ask a question, indicate your name and affiliation if you wish. Should any questions go unanswered because of the time constraints, UNIDIR will follow up with the panelists and provide you with a response bilaterally after the event. Please also note that all the briefings will be recorded and will be made available on UNIDIR's website and in our YouTube channel. Our reliance on technology to conduct activities under the pandemic cannot be understated, but technology is not perfect, and we have put in place some measures to deal with potential disruptions. This is a secure platform, and all participants have joined using unique personalized links. Should the virtual platform be compromised, we will close it down and launch a new meeting. New access links will be emailed to you immediately, and we should be able to resume the event within 5 to 10 minutes. This is only a backup measure, and I hope that we don't need to resort to it. Finally, I would like to stress that UNIDIR promotes the core values of the UN, so integrity, professionalism, and respect for diversity. And as such, we are committed to convening diversity in voices and in opinions. Nonetheless, the views expressed in today's event are the sole responsibility of the individual panelists. These views do not reflect the views or opinions of the United Nations, UNIDIR, its staff members, or sponsor. Now, we are gathering the community today because we understand the importance of enhancing thinking and exchanging ideas on substantive issues in preparations for the 8th Biennial Meeting of States on the Program of Action on Small Arms, the PoA, and the International Tracing Instrument, the ITI, which will take place in New York next week from 27th of June to 1st of July. National, regional, and global implementation of the PoA and the ITI are key in contributing to the comprehensive control of small arms and live weapons throughout their life cycle, as well as preventing diversion and misuse. So to support preparations for BMS 8, and thanks to the support provided by member states, UNIDIR and ODA are co-organizing this series of online briefings for each UN regional grouping. Each briefing will begin with a panel discussion consisting of presentations on topics to be considered during BMS 8 and will be followed by a brief discussion. We hope that today's event and the series as a whole will contribute to enhanced dialogue on some critical aspects of the PoA's implementation at various levels and in different regions. So as with all of our CAPS activities, we welcome your feedback and suggestions, so please also do that. We continue to be in a learning curve. And now to begin the discussion, we have an opening video message from the chair designate of BMS 8, His Excellency, Mr. Enrique Manalo. So my colleague Ruben is going to play that video for us.
Evening, delegates. I thank the UNIDIR and UNODA for organizing this regional briefing for each of the 5 regional groups of the United Nations. As BMS 8 is fast approaching, this regional briefing was designed to stimulate thinking and exchange of ideas on substantive issues in preparation for the 8th Biennial Meeting of States on the PoA and ITI, scheduled to take place in New York from 27 June to 1 July 2022. I believe this regional briefing is important and would be helpful to delegates, especially those new to the portfolio, to be better reminded of the key issues and outcomes of BMS 7, to have an overview of the highlights in the PoA/ITI implementation, to zero in on key concerns relating to international cooperation and assistance, and to be more keen on other possible important issues for consideration at BMS 8 and the 4th Review Conference. In the past several informal consultations on BMS 8, I have had the good fortune of having smooth and fruitful discussions with delegations. Your substantive inputs have helped the chair shepherd the group to coming up with progressive versions of the outcome document in the last several weeks. I hope we continue this momentum until the week itself of BMS 8. In this regard, I wish your region a fruitful discussion on BMS 8 over the next hour, and I look forward to seeing all of you in New York next week. Thank you, and good day to all.
On behalf of UNIDIR and the Conventional Arms and Ammunition Program, I now would like to express our sincere thanks and appreciation to His Excellency Ambassador Manalo and his team for their support and interest shown during the preparation of the briefings, as well as in promoting multilateral conversations on effective implementation of the PoA and the ITI in the last months. This, I believe, is an excellent way to start the event today. And now to begin the panel, I will start by giving the floor to my dear colleague, Paul Holton, who is the head of UNIDIR's Conventional Arms and Ammunition Program. And Paul will provide us with a brief overview of the key issues and outcomes from last year's BMS 7. So Paul, the floor is yours. Or the screen, maybe.
Thank you, Manu, and good afternoon, good morning, or indeed good evening to all colleagues that are joining today. As Manu just said, my intention is to provide a scene setter for today's briefing on preparations for BMS 8 by highlighting some of the key issues and outcomes from the 7th Biennial Meeting of States, as outlined on this slide. Therefore, I'll touch upon the issue of diversion, measurability and implementation, peace, security, and sustainable development. With regard to the International Tracing Instrument, or ITI, implications of developments in manufacturing, technology, and design, and then finally conclude with international assistance. Of course, I don't have time to focus on all the issues discussed in BMS 7 here, so I won't discuss international cooperation or some of the potentially interesting issues and emerging challenges with regard to the replica and blank firing weapons into functional weapons or 3D printing, and many other issues too. But of course, we can discuss these issues in relation to BMS 8 as appropriate later in today's session. Now, I'm fully aware that the participants in this briefing are all experts on the PoA, but apologies, I always like to start with some basic facts to begin. And therefore, I thought it's a useful reminder to say that the Programme of Action on Small Arms, or the PoA, was adopted by member states in 2001 in order to sort of strengthen and develop agreed norms and measures at the global, regional, and national levels to reinforce and coordinate efforts to prevent, combat, and eradicate the illicit trade in small arms in all its aspects, but also to develop and implement agreed international measures to prevent, combat, and eradicate illicit manufacturing and trafficking, to focus upon regions in the world where conflicts are coming to an end and where there are serious problems with the excessive and destabilizing accumulation of small arms and light weapons, as well as mobilizing the necessary political will throughout the international community to take action on combating illicit transfers and manufacturing, and overall to promote responsible action by states to prevent the illicit export, import, transit, and retransfer of small arms and light weapons. In addition, in 2005, the General Assembly adopted the International Tracing Instrument, or ITI, which specifically provides a framework for our cooperation in weapons tracing, and thus helps to fulfill one of the commitments made by governments during the discussions on the Programme of Action. The PoA also included provisions for a periodic review of implementation, and here we have BMS, or Biennial Meetings of States, RevCons, or review conferences, and on specific issues, meetings of governmental experts, or MGEs. And at the bottom of the slide, you can see a timeline of the meetings that we've had to date, and the upcoming BMS 8 next week, and in 2 years' time, the 4th review conference, or RevCon 4. Of course, we have an unusual situation in that BMS 8 is taking place just 11 months after BMS 7 due to COVID. We're therefore having an annual rather than a biennial meeting of states with regard to 21 and 22. I've put the mandate for BMS 7 on this slide, noting that it just took place less than a year ago, because in addition to the standing item of reviewing implementation of the PoA and the ITI, the BMS 7 also focused on preventing and combating the diversion and the illicit international transfer of small arms and light weapons to unauthorized recipients. And therefore, I thought that the first issue that I'll begin in my discussion of key issues from BMS 7 is the issue on diversion. I wanted to begin by underlining that BMS 7 recognized that there are diversion risks at each stage of the life cycle of a weapon: manufacture, before and during transfer, post-delivery storage in stockpiles, end use or disposal. The discussions also indicated situations in which illicit transfers to unauthorized recipients take place: cross-border trafficking without appropriate authorization, unauthorized state retransfer, and the violation of arms embargoes imposed by the Security Council highlighted in this regard. I also wanted to highlight that the PoA is itself an instrument that contains provisions to prevent, combat, and mitigate the risk of diversion at each stage of the life cycle. There are calls in the PoA for exercising effective national control over the whole life cycle of arms and light weapons in all its aspects, from manufacture through areas of jurisdiction for export, import, transit, transshipment, retransfer, or brokering, providing for the safe, secure, comprehensive, and effective management of stockpiles through measures such as adequate marking, record keeping, inventory management, and accounting control measures. BMS 7 also emphasized the importance of advocating a whole-of-government approach to mitigating diversion risks, and also placed a special emphasis on trying to strengthen, consistent with domestic laws, efforts for collecting in a standardized, systematic, and long-term way data that would help inform analysis on diversion and therefore putting in place appropriate measures. For me, it was not so much encouraging, it was more encouraging member states to keep implementing existing PoA provisions and share some information about those measures that have proven particularly useful. In this regard, I suppose we could also mention some of the work that the UNIDIR has been conducting in this regard, and in particular, our diversion analysis framework. Something that's a rather newer topic for PoA meetings is the issue of trying to focus on increasing understanding of progress in implementation of the PoA and the ITI. What works, what has worked to tackle the illicit trade in small arms? Now here the discussions looked at some of the traditional elements contained within the Programme of Action, such as the use of national action plans on small arms and light weapons to tackle priority challenges, and the use of national reports for assessing progress in implementation. There's also, of course, the continued emphasis on strengthening cooperation with civil society, youth, victims and survivors of armed violence, parliamentarians, industry, and the private sector. But there's also efforts to build on positive experiences in some countries and regions, considering the establishment of voluntary, national and regional targets and approaches. I'll come back to this when discussing international assistance, and we'll have, I think, one of the best examples of a regional approach when we hear from Juliana from CSAC on this particular issue. Finally, BMS 7 also promoted the collection of disaggregated data by sex and age, which I'll also touch upon now. Building on previous discussions within the PoA framework, the BMS 7 outcome document highlighted the benefits of connecting implementation of the PoA with other global and national development efforts. At the global level, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its goals, targets, and indicators were highlighted, especially but not only Indicator 16.4.2. Discussions also highlighted connections with the Women, Peace and Security, or WPS agenda, looking at linkages between national action plans and policies on small arms and WPS in particular. There's of course recognition of calls to ensure the equal, full and effective participation of women in all policy, planning and implementation processes, mechanisms and fora with regard to the PoA and small arms issues, as well as calling for data collection where feasible to be disaggregated by sex, age and disability to take account of the differing impacts of the illicit small arms trade, and then to use this data to inform evidence-based, gender-sensitive policy making and programming. And of course, to then exchange experiences, lessons, and good practices in this regard. The discussions on the ITI called for member states to reinforce efforts to implement marking, record keeping, and tracing provisions of the ITI, regardless of the materials, design, or methods used for manufacture of small arms and light weapons. The exchange of views on recent developments in manufacturing, technology, and design focused especially on polymer and modular weapons. These discussions contained also a proposal made during BMS 7 for the establishment of an open-ended working group to address challenges and opportunities for marking, tracing, and record keeping of polymer and modular weapons. Paragraph 100 of the outcome document called for consideration of this proposal at BMS 8. The vote was held on this particular paragraph, with 100 member states voting in favour, 1 voting against, and 10 abstentions. In addition, BMS 7 requested the Secretariat to develop a good practice document on marking practices for polymer and modular weapons, taking into account the views of all member states on this issue. As always in discussions regarding implementation of the Programme of Action and the International Tracing Instrument, considerable emphasis was placed on the continuing importance of international assistance to ensure the effective and comprehensive implementation of the PoA and the ITI. There are several provisions on ways to ensure and further strengthen comprehensive international assistance for life cycle management, including greater cooperation, coordination, and information sharing between donors and recipients of international assistance. There was also some discussion on whether international assistance is effective or whether in some cases we're seeing a duplication of efforts and we need to take steps to remedy this. As mentioned a moment ago, the issue of voluntary national and regional targets was raised in connection with international assistance. Here, it highlighted how perhaps member states could use such targets to support their requests for assistance and mobilize resources, as well as to demonstrate where progress is being made in this regard. Also, BMS 7 requested the Secretariat to present to BMS 8 funding and administrative arrangements for a dedicated fellowship training program to strengthen technical knowledge and expertise in areas related to the implementation of the PoA and the ITI. And of course, there was also references to existing UN assistance for supporting implementation, such as the Secretary General's Saving Lives Entity, or Salient, and the Trust Facility supporting cooperation on arms regulation, or UNSCAR. And before Manu switches off my microphone and tells me that we've had enough from me, I just wanted to conclude with a short summary of some of the key areas contained in the outcome of BMS 7 for the PoA and the ITI. For the PoA, there are some specific recommendations or categories regarding national, regional, and international levels. The recommendation or the key discussion point for the ITI are flagged here, and also the cross-cutting issue of international cooperation and assistance to implement the PoA and the ITI. At the national level, I think I've already mentioned that there's the importance of continuing to implement the PoA to prevent diversion. I didn't touch upon it, but BMS 7 did touch upon a number of emerging challenges, which I mentioned at the very beginning of this presentation. And then the issue I've focused upon have been the strengthening of the measurability and implementation of the program of action at the national level. At the regional level, there was an encouragement for regional instruments, roadmaps, and action plans. And as I said, I'm delighted we'll hear from CSAC on a very useful, not just roadmap, but I think also one of the templates that's being used for many other regions in this regard, as well as discussions on promoting and strengthening cross-border and regional cooperation. At the international level, we had discussions on conflict and post-conflict settings, and also the linkages between the armed violence and broader peace, security, and sustainable development agendas, which I know that our colleagues at IANSA will touch upon in a moment. With that, Manu, I'd just like to thank everyone for their attention, and I look forward to hearing the next excellent presentations we have to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul, for your clear presentation on what happened in BMS 7. You touched upon certain elements that are of importance, and yeah, for example, the applying a life cycle approach to the issue of diversion, the importance of being able to measure progress in the process and what has worked. And that reflection, I think, is quite relevant as well for the conversations this year. Also the nexus with other processes, as well as two of the main issues last year in connection with the development of manufacturing technology and design, but also the issue of international assistance and cooperation, both through the fellowship, the dedicated fellowship training program, but also the importance of leveraging the trust funds on SCAR and Salient. So thank you very much for all that. And now I would like to welcome our colleague Juliana Buzzi from Southeastern and Eastern Europe Clearinghouse for the Control of Small Arms and Light Weapons, CSAC. Thank you, Juliana, for providing your regional perspective, experiences, and highlights on the implementation of the PoA and ITI. So Juliana, the screen is yours now.
Thank you very much to you, Manuel. And let me also thank both UNODA and UNIDIR for inviting us actually to provide some of the good practices developed in this region, actually. And Manuel, feel free to switch off the mic if I'm going on for too long. I just wanted to share the screen very quickly for the presentation. And if you can just let me know if you can see, oh, yes, perfect. Can you fully see the slide? Yes, great. Yeah, thanks again. It's really a pleasure to be able to provide with some of the good practices that are coming from this region, thanks to a long and steady support and investment to the region of Southeast Europe. Before I go into that, I just very quickly, because I think I see also for the participants, some of them are very familiar with the work of CSAC, but it is very important to actually explain that we are a joint initiative of UNDP and the Regional Cooperation Council, which is actually the successor of the Stability Pact. And why this is important to explain is that while the administrative support is being provided by UNDP, the political mandate, we receive it from the jurisdictions and which were member partners of the original Stability Pact, actually. So the mandate is in accordance with CSAC establishment is to support all the stakeholders in order to strengthen their capacities to control and reduce the proliferation and the misuse of small arms and light weapons, and as such to contribute to enhance security and stability in Southeast and Eastern Europe. Later on, our mandate was actually extended to provide support also in mainstreaming gender in security, consistent with the UN Security Council Resolution 1325. You can see in the screen the jurisdictions that we are covering with the support since 2002, actually, is the Western Balkans 6, plus Republic of Moldova. And later on, we have also provided some support to Ukraine and also to Belarus. We have involved them in some of the regional processes. Our key areas of work actually encompass all the functional areas of arms control, and they start from the legal and regulatory framework when it comes to firearms, ammunition, and explosives, to cross-border control, to information management, support to all activities related to raising awareness on the dangers of weapons in terms of also all its components, including voluntary surrender, legalization, but also deactivation, as well as support to investigations of all firearm-related crimes, and that includes also support to marking, tracing, and record keeping of firearms, physical security and stockpile management, and all that the PSSM encompasses, but also supporting the authorities in the control of arms exports as well. And all the support that we have provided to the authorities in the region since 2002 has been also owed to substantial, actually, funding support from the European Union from the beginning until now. And I will not go through this slide, but this is actually what we are currently implementing, several council decisions with the support of the EU, but also other donors, including the Department of State. Through this work started since 2002, we came to a breakthrough in 2018, where the authorities in the Western Balkans got together into a high-level meeting held in Podgorica between deputy ministers of Interior and Foreign Affairs to agree on the outline of a roadmap for the Western Balkans, with the main aim to actually strengthen and to increase and reaffirm the commitment in terms of control of small arms and light weapons and the ammunition in the Western Balkans. So taking it from there, the roadmap developed in close cooperation with small arms and light weapons commissions, which had been established ahead of the roadmap in each of the jurisdictions that are beneficiaries of the roadmap. The roadmap was adopted at the London summit in July 2018, and then the whole process of making it operational continued through specific action plans that were developed and adopted at the jurisdiction level. And this was done actually with really substantial support from Germany and France, but also from the EU. And facilitated by CSAC in its role of the clearinghouse in the region. Most of you know the vision of the roadmap is to actually make this region an exporter of security and also build the sustainable capacities, actually. And this is the key word in the roadmap: building of sustainable capacities to fight the misuse, the trafficking, and also proliferation, illicit proliferation of firearms, ammunition, and explosives. And I continuously mention all of them because it actually covers not only firearms, but also there are concrete commitments there covering also ammunition and explosives. The roadmap has 7 concrete goals, and I will go very quickly and briefly into that. And these are very much in line, actually, with the program of action as well, because as I mentioned earlier, these are covering all the functional areas of arms control. And the jurisdictions that we are supporting in the Western Balkans, most of them are actually member states of the UN program of action. So this, the adoption of this document is of course contributing also to commitments that they have under the UN program of action. So the roadmap has 7 goals covering the functional areas of arms control, and 38 overall targets in each of these goals of the roadmap. And what is a novelty, and actually one of the key good practices coming from this region, is the key performance indicators that were developed jointly by the authorities when developing the roadmap, in order to make sure that progress is actually captured in all the commitments under the roadmap implementation. These are very quickly the goals of the roadmap that were agreed and jointly adopted by the authorities in the Western Balkans. As you see, these are covering from the legal and regulatory framework of firearms, ammunition, and explosives, and one of the key drivers in this region is also accession to the European Union. So, harmonization of the legal framework with the EU acquis is one of the key goals of the roadmap. In addition, the second goal covers the formulation, development of evidence-based policies. It was mentioned very clearly by Paul how important this part is, and in order to ensure that the policies are addressing the needs of both men and women, but also that these policies and practices are intelligence-led as well. The other goals of the roadmap are covering, the third one is another key goal of the roadmap, because it covers the preventing and countering trafficking of firearms, ammunition, and explosives, but also controlling the legal trade of weapons and ammunition. The fourth and the fifth goal are covering the part of the awareness, increasing the awareness, but also increasing, ensuring advocacy and outreach. And this covers not only civilian population, but also all the entities, private or legal, that are dealing actually with firearms, because those could be actually important source of proliferation of firearms. The sixth and the seventh goal of the roadmap are looking at the physical security and stockpile management, and that means both destruction as well as ensuring the security of the storages. And again, another comprehensive approach is in here, because it doesn't look only at the storages of the armed forces, but also of the law enforcement agencies. Both security and safety aspects, as well as not only the infrastructure, but also improvement of human capacities when it comes to the security of the storages. These are the 14 key performance indicators, and these are there exactly to provide some substantial information in terms of progress. And when developing these key performance indicators, it was really, attention was paid for these indicators to cover all the goals of the roadmap. There is one specific indicator there that is very much related to the trafficking of the firearms, because of the region being very often seen as the source of the illicit firearms into the European Union. And this is also the key performance indicator 5, and it's there to also look at the threat in time, how this has decreased or increased, the threat coming from the Western Balkans when it comes to trafficking of firearms, ammunition, and explosives. Another very good practice that is coming from the region with the adoption of the roadmap is a unique coordination and monitoring platform that has been established together with the authorities in the region. I mentioned the key performance indicators and the goals of the roadmap. So what the authorities have agreed among themselves is to report at least twice per year based on the key performance indicators through a very specific format, but also provide narrative reports based on the goals of the roadmap and the overall targets of the roadmap. So twice per year, CSAC, we are receiving reports from the authorities, which we are consolidating into a regional report. And these reports, both the key performance indicators reports and the narrative reports, are distributed at least twice per year in regional meetings of the roadmap. So what does this actually, what's the added value of this one is that there is a much better understanding of the progress in terms of at the regional level, by the region as a whole, into all the goals of the roadmap, but also of the challenges and the gaps that exist in its implementation. In addition, part of the coordination and the monitoring platform established are meetings that are held again twice per year, by the Small Arms and Light Weapons Commission. So at the jurisdiction level, they organized this meeting with CSAC support to take account of the progress, challenges, and needs at the local level, and looking more in detail the implementation of their action plans in support of the roadmap. At the same time, regional meetings are also organized twice per year, and this to give the better understanding of the progress at the regional level, but also to provide the authorities throughout the region to see how each of them is doing actually in terms of implementation of the commitments under the roadmap. One additional step that was undertaken was the establishment of a UN multi-partner trust fund. This is one of the funding mechanisms that are supporting the roadmap implementation. It's not the only one, but this is the only one that was established just for the purpose of the roadmap implementation. Established in 2018 by both UNDP and UNODC, the trust fund has accumulated at least $21 million actually to date, with more than 10 million already disbursed into at least 10 projects implemented by UNDP and UNODC in support of the authorities. And what this trust fund has contributed is, as I said, to a coordinated donor approach, but also to making sure that the funding is going to where the needs are as well, because these projects are also developed in close cooperation with the authorities in each of the region. So just very briefly, why the regional approach? I think I was trying to make it to make my point throughout the presentation, but it came clear because it ensures continuous political commitment. And I think this region is one of the few regions that actually has come together to such a document and such commitment, and in this very specific actually area as well. It also contributes to standardization of approaches, whether that is at the policy level or at the operational level as well. It contributes to the synergy of the efforts through sharing of information and of knowledge, but also of the expertise. Throughout the years, for example, there have been many good practices that have been exchanged through the jurisdictions in the Western Balkans themselves as well. So that's what contributes again also to the standardization. It also ensures a strong coordination and information sharing, not only among institutions within the Western Balkans, but also among donors as well. So that ensures a better distribution of resources, as well as of the implementing partners that are engaged in supporting the authorities. It does promote confidence building. We are a witness of that throughout all these years of regional cooperation, of regular meetings together, and how the capacities of the authorities have actually increased also because of this. It also encourages positive competition. We have seen throughout the years, many projects initiated just because they could see a good practice initiated already into another jurisdiction, for example. Stronger cooperation, we see that at the personal level as well. I mean, even though we are a CSAC, we're there to facilitate the cooperation. The jurisdictions have actually strengthened their bilateral cooperation as a result of this. And it also promotes further the transparency. This is not an easy, and it's a sensitive topic, but we have seen some remarkable results, actually. This region, I can remind you, it's the only sub-region beyond except for the European Union, that is publishing regularly a regional report on arms exports, actually. It also facilitates tackling similar operational challenges through improved cross-border cooperation. And this is very important because, in particular, when it comes to trafficking of firearms, ammunition, and explosives, this is not the problem and the challenge of one country alone, and as such cannot have an isolated solution. It's very important, the cross-border cooperation. It also, as we have seen very recently from the roadmap implementation, it ensures a strong and diversified funding support. it is not always easy. So, and right when I need to change to challenges, I'm being challenged because I cannot go into the next slide. Let me do this. Can you hear me? Yes, right?
Yes, we can hear you.
For some reason, then I can go. You can see the slide now, right?
Yes, perfect.
Perfect. Yes, challenges, there are, of course, challenges. It's not always easy, and not everything is easy, because political situation throughout the region, it's an important factor. It's very often it's a fragile political situation with very often we have frequent elections as well. So those influence progress and sustainability of the process. In addition, there are competing priorities in each jurisdiction. So the arms control is not the only priority of the jurisdiction. There is limited absorption capacity by the authorities, and also a high turnover of staff, as I mentioned, the frequent elections at both policy and operational level. And also something that we have been reminded constantly, and we have seen also very recently with the roadmap implementation, are the limited institutional capacities compared to the multitude of actions. We are all the organizations are working very often with units that have 1 or 2 people in their composition. So we always need to be aware of this as well whenever we are planning or implementing activities and projects in support of the authorities. But to conclude, why and what made it possible to have, I mean, in our view, such a commitment adopted and agreed among the jurisdictions is the strong ownership as a result of all these years of joint work actually and strong cooperation. The roadmap, the Western Balkans roadmap, it's really a testimony of strong ownership and commitment by the authorities of the Western Balkan. In addition to that, and not least important, there is really strong partnership between the Western Balkans, the EU, Germany and France as key supporters from the very beginning of the initiative, and CSAC in the implementation. There is sound and diversified funding support through the Multi-Partner Trust Fund. We should never forget the regional cooperation framework ensured by the Regional Cooperation Council, because it is only through this framework actually that we can make sure that we have all the Western Balkans jurisdictions engaged in this document. And comprehensive coordination and information sharing among institutions, donors, implementing partners, as well as the steady implementation support by all the organizations. I just wanted to conclude that the roadmap, it is not, I think, the only example of good practices that is now actually influencing, we can say it, influencing regional but also global policies. I mean, it's this regional document, it's the regional approach, it's the monitoring of the progress through the key performance indicators. But even before the roadmap, from this region, there are some really key good practices that are influencing a larger policy. I can mention that the region for years has been working now in establishing and in developing evidence-based policies. It came actually from this region, the work all together in developing and implementing a small arms and light weapons survey with really very detailed data on distribution impact and impact of firearms. There are some really good products right now on gender screening of the legal framework that has been undertaken from this region, and some guidelines that can be used from either by either regions can be also used. The firearms focal points that are being established in this region are also being used as an example and very important analytical unit when it comes to the investigation of firearms. And in conclusion, that's why I mentioned them. It is only because of the work at the regional level and not as jurisdictions alone. Thank you very much. And I'm really thankful that you did not switch off the mic.
Thank you, Juliana. And this was a very, very clear and enlightening presentation. You very clearly highlighted the importance of regional and national voluntary target setting and also information sharing. And from my side, I take a few elements and points that you highlighted as very, very important. First, you mentioned the comprehensive approach at the national and regional level, encompassing arms, ammunition, and explosives. I think there's something that we see across regions as well at that level, which I believe it's very important. You mentioned the importance of strong ownership through the participatory nature of the roadmap and how it came to life, let's say, and this dual approach of high-level political buy-in, but also the continued implementation of action plans at the technical level, improving cross-border cooperation, and those two things coming together, contributing to the success of the roadmap. Of course, based on the key performance indicators, which I think having that in mind, both at the political level and the technical level, is very, very helpful. And then the practical elements to support sustainability. You mentioned the regional coordination meetings, the regular reporting, or the creation of the multi-partner trust fund to get the necessary funding to sustain the activity. So thank you very much for your clear presentation. And now we would like to conclude today's briefing with a contribution from the International Action Network on Small Arms, IANSA. And let me say that IANSA has been particularly active in preparations for BMS 8, strongly advocating for the importance of an effective implementation of the PoA. So with this, I would like to thank Ivan Marquez, Managing Director of IANSA, for sharing his views with us in this session. So over to you, Ivan.
Thank you, Manu. It is a pleasure for IANSA to be part of this regional briefing in preparation for BMS 8. I would like to start by thanking UNIDIR for the invitation, but especially for coming up with a great way to level organizations and stakeholders in the ramp up to the meeting. And of course, for always promoting the opportunities to hear from civil society. IANSA is a global hub for local, national, and regional civil society organizations working in any form of small arms violence reduction. And it is the civil society coordinator for this meeting in New York. For this meeting of states parties, IANSA had identified crucial issues that should be taken into consideration in the unfolding discussion during next week in New York at the UN. But before revealing the specific issues, I would like to share one overarching thought on how to make progress in addressing these different topics for the effective implementation of the PoA and the ITI. All 6 key civil society issues promoted by IANSA in this BMS 8 focuses on previous progress. Each biennial meeting of states or review conference has provided material and precedents for the meetings that follow, as we earlier heard highlighted by Paul in his presentation. It is then critically important that the previous outcome documents serve as a floor to the consideration of proposals and not a ceiling. The illicit trade, proliferation, and misuse of small arms and light weapons for violence and crime are changing, and states need to address those changes. Millions of people around the world continue to be affected by violence and abuses committed or facilitated by the irresponsible use of such arms. But without further ado, these are the key issues IANSA has identified as needing particular attention at BMS 8. The first one is being on the gender outcomes of RevCon 3 and BMS 7 and ensuring the inclusion of survivors and youth. As originally approved, the PoA gave little attention to affected communities and underrepresented groups. The words gender, youth, and survivors were not even included in the 2001 text, for example. Through the efforts of civil society and our diplomatic partners, we've made significant progress on inclusion in the last several years. There's much more work to be done. In addition, advocates of inclusion have had to counter the contention of some states that these issues are somehow secondary to the effective implementation of the PoA. Second, enhancing measures for the collection and destruction of small arms and light weapons and their ammunition. Timely destruction of illicit, obsolete, and surplus small arms and light weapons and ammunition is a primary method of preventing the excessive and destabilizing accumulations of such materials and ensuring it will not be diverted to illicit markets or to unauthorized end users or end uses. Securing legal stockpiles and decommissioning illicit, obsolete, and surplus weapons is important and can decrease the risk of diversion. The third key issue identified is moving forward on developing national targets for implementation of the PoA. This comes especially in a good time after hearing Juliana's presentation. And another positive development included in the BMS 7 outcome document was the proposal that individual states consider setting voluntary national and regional targets to support implementation of the PoA and the ITI. The suggestion to develop national targets was based on the Secretary General recommendation in his 2019 report, in which he argued that the urgency and the character of the small arms issue is so diverse around the world, there can be no right or wrong national ambition level. Regional experience like the one we just heard are good examples of how this could work and work well. Fourth issue, ensuring attention to synergies among instruments that are critical to preventing small arms and light weapons proliferation, violence, and harm. One of the most contentious issues in the PoA process in recent years has been the extent to which outcome documents should acknowledge potential synergies between the PoA and other instruments. The illicit arms trade is a complex issue. It involves a wide range of potential factors, including types of weapons and ammunition, actors, diversion routes, and payment types. Taking advantage of synergies among relevant international as well as regional instruments that address the trade in small arms and light weapons can help increase their collective power to help control this trade and reduce its human cost. Fifth, increasing attention to the need for sustainable international cooperation and assistance in implementing the PoA and the ITI. The countries often have the fewest resources. A common response to the situation is to view international cooperation and assistance as something that flows from the wealthier countries to less wealthy ones. But it's also possible to have cooperation among countries with high levels of resources. And importantly, there is also the possibility of peer-to-peer collaboration between and among countries that have fewer material resources. One good example is the creation or improvement of information sharing mechanisms based on information already available from existing registers, even if incomplete or unleveled between participants. And finally, setting a robust agenda and mandate for RevCon 4. One of the key tasks for BMS 8 will be establishing a mandate for the 4th Review Conference on the Program of Action and the International Tracing Instrument, which is scheduled to be held in 2024. RevCon 4 offers a critically important opportunity to propose programs and actions to improve implementation of the PoA and the ITI. For more information on all of these 6 issues, please refer to IANSA's upcoming publication on topics to be considered in the BMS 8. I'll finish saying that in these dreadful times for Eastern Europe and the world, with the war in Ukraine, IANSA keeps advocating for the effective implementation of the PoA and the ITI and all international arms control instruments. Thank you, and I stand ready for questions.
Thank you very much, Ivan, for your presentation, for your remarks, and thanks for highlighting the changing dynamics in illicit arms trade, their impact to affected communities, and also how important is to make changes at the national, regional, and global levels to address the illicit trade and misuse of small arms to precisely address the negative consequences. And you mentioned in your remarks the importance of stockpile security and diversion prevention. But I really like also that you touched upon the issue of international cooperation and assistance, and in particular for those states with less resources available. I am also very appreciative of the way in which IANSA also helps sending clear messages on what, from civil society perspective, needs to be done to make the PoA process and BMS 8 in this year successful. So thank you for all that. So in order to be able to finish within the allocated time and in the hour, I would like first to thank all the panelists for your great contributions today and your sound reflections in preparation to BMS 8. I hope that the ideas and the inputs shared today will help frame the discussions during the BMS next week. And I would like to also thank everyone from ODA and UNIDIR, all the colleagues that have been working behind the scenes, and also the participants for taking the time to engage in the discussion. We hope that today's event has contributed to the preparation. And I also wanted to say that you will be able to find the recording of the briefing, not only this one, but all the briefings on UNIDIR's website and on the YouTube channel. So with this, I thank you again, everyone, and I would like now to close the event and wish you a fruitful week in preparation for our work on the following week. Thank you very much and have a nice week.